Hey everyone, Pixologic Daisuke here. I'm gonna sculpt some cloth today. There was a couple of requests related to dress and how to do some folds, and I thought to myself, like, why not do a really complex fold and try to push myself as well. So it's gonna be a ride for me as well. So if you could join and have fun just watching me suffer some cloth folding, just join your ride. so this is a model I'm just reusing. I made this for Dark Elf, but since I just wanted to focus on the dress itself and not really focus on the base geometry, so I'm gonna just use this for the base. So I'm gonna start with posing first, and let me just create a layer so I can just pose. Oh, yeah, you need to go to the top of the subdivision level and pose. So what I need to do is I'm planning to do some courtesy pose, which is, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's called courtesy, and it's a pose where you hold your skirts on the side and then bow. So it's a European thing to do, and yeah, it's gonna take a bit of time to actually adjust this, but it's not gonna like distract from the actual like the sculpting aspect of the dress. Hey, Ian. I'm fine. I took a vaccine shot yesterday, so I'm a bit fatigued, but that's pretty much it. Like, nothing serious going on. I did get a fever after a couple of hours after the first shot, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, and my left arm is a bit heavy. Like, I have the muscle fatigue, but that's pretty much it. Like, I can't really go beyond this height. Like, it's a bit tiring, but yeah. Like, pushing the keyboard is the least of the worries. Yeah, so I'm a bit worried about the second shot because it's like you're gonna have a lot of fevers compared to the first shot, but yeah, that's my only concern at the right moment. But it's gonna be a month away, so it's not gonna like affect me right now. So I just need to be aware of that situation. So I'm gonna focus just on the dress today, and like the posing itself is not really that important, but like it's better to have a bit of posing compared to none of it. A lot of water, tea, Gatorade, yeah. So for the pose, before I did the stream, before I started the stream, I did the pose myself, but like I learned a couple of things. One, the weight will be distributed on the back compared to like what I thought initially it would affect. Like the weight, the distribution will be on the back side compared to the front. So you need to keep that in mind when doing this pose. And another thing I learned is that it's better to just do the pose yourself and try to like think about where the weight distribution is. Like I looked at a couple of images related to this pose, and I was wondering how do you do this? It's a bit awkward position, and like yeah, it's better to do it yourself and try it, and then like see where the weight is. So for example, if you just bend your legs, bend your knees, it's not gonna really change the weight distribution on the pose, and sometimes it looks off, so you need to consider that as well. So for the dress, I do have a rough design, but I'm not really sure which design to go with, but I'll see what I can come up with. I usually do the designs on the fly, so I do a couple of research and then just go with it. Ooh, the fingers are a bit messed up, but yeah, it's fine. Not a big deal. If you have any questions related to ZBrush or ZBrush Core, ZBrush Core Mini, Japanese culture in general, any questions related to figures, animes, just hit me up. And lots of water, Gatorade. I started posing in a mirror. Feels a bit awkward for those sexy poses. You'll get used to it, yeah. Yeah, like a lot of like illustrators are like trying those poses in the mirror first, so they get the poses correctly. But yeah, sometimes it feels really awkward. Okay, the rough pose is fine. I may need to adjust the shapes a bit, but not really significant. You have every articulation on a different polygroup, so you can move it easier, right? Or how do you do that? That's easy. That easy because I usually mask manually everything. Oh, so when you press Control, and then if your mode is on Move, what it does is it will try to mask out the mesh following the topology. So if I go to a lower subdivision and then Control and then drag on the surface, like you can see it's like following this surface, and that this will make your like posing really easy. Like for example, if I have a mesh like this, and then if I use that technique, it's going to do something like this. And then if I want to rotate, I just need to adjust the position a bit and then rotate. So yeah, this is the easiest way to like get the masking. And for the head, currently I need to move this to a position, and I would like to use the new function called Stager, which is in geometry. And then if I go to home stage and then register the current position and then move the mesh around like this, and then make it like this, so it's bowing down a bit, maybe a bit more forward. And then if I press target stage, and then if I press switch stage, it's gonna go back and forth between the home position and the angled position. So I can switch back and forth, changing the details, even changing the topology, and then I could just go back to the position and then keep that symmetrical in the world axis. So this is really handy for like, especially if your model is like rotated, twisted, or if the parts are like specifically on your bracelet, or if you have a mesh like a sword you need to hold in your hand. These kind of like stuff is really handy. So now I have the basic pose. It's not perfect, but it's fine. Like I can start with this, and let's start with a simple dress design. So I'm gonna usually just do the masking like this, and then maybe something like this. And then remove the areas I don't want to keep. And then press extract. Extract from subtool. And then I don't need any thickness for now. Then just apply So I have a mesh like this. And then I'll need to, I'll just separate the colors so it's a bit easy to see. And then add a bit more inflation so it comes out side of the body like so, and then think about the design. So what I want to do is use cloth hook, which is CK, and then go to dynamics and then press collision volume to get the overall volume itself. And I don't want to do this, so I'm going to mask this area, and maybe I don't want to do collision volumes because currently it's hitting the body itself. And what I want to do is more focus on the design, so just getting the shapes like this. So I just need a rough design, and I'll switch back to snake hook so I can stretch this a bit. I'm gonna do the remeshing afterwards. Well, maybe I'll just do the remeshing now. There's no enough topology to pull around, so I'm gonna do this, move around. And to smooth these kind of like areas, I would just use the smooth cloth. Smooth cloth. So it smooths out the borders like this. And let's see. Hey, welcome. Currently, I want a dress which is separated here like this, and then having this kind of like arch happening here. And I just need the rough shapes for now, and then I'll just move on to another area pretty soon. And for the current folds, I think I'll just cut this area so you can have more designs. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll try my best. Like, it will be tricky for me as well. Like, I'm not really good at like complex dress. I'm not really knowledgeable, but yeah, I'll try my best. And let's see, there's a seam here. And then what I need to do is, usually there's a gathering of the lines here, so it looks like a bit puffy. And then on the back side, I'm thinking about these kind of like shapes. I'm gonna add a bit of like ruffles on the side, on the neck around here, the collars. But yeah, so there's a rough design like this, and I would need to adjust the bodies. So currently her shoulders are a bit awkward, and I need to change a bit of that. But yeah, it's fine for now. And then let's see what I can do with additional cloth. So what I would need to do is mask out this area, like so. And then maybe a bit more on the top. And then what I would want to do is extract. I don't need these amount of detail, so I'm gonna lower the subdivisions, extract, accept, and then I'll get the mesh like this. And I'm gonna inflate. And stretch these details. Usually when it comes to ZBrush, the base mesh and the general like overall shape is more important than the details. And I see a lot of people just focusing on the details before they get the rough shapes done, but usually it's better to spend more time on getting the rough shapes before anything. So just keep that in mind. And also, if you press back face mask with one-sided polys, it's easy to like add or move the thickness part of the mesh. Sorry, the Skype is a bit popping, so I'm gonna lower the volume a bit. With Skype. Okay, should be fine. Hey Daisuke, greeting from Mexico. Hey Sergio. Yeah, welcome. Is ZBrush core enough for beginners to learn sculpting? Yeah. Usually the separation between ZBrush and ZBrush Core is the technical stuff. So if you have to go into technical, like if you need to understand the difference between a good topology and bad topology, and like if you want efficiency, if you want to save a lot of time, then yeah, ZBrush is the way to go. But most of the basic stuff is included in ZBrush Core. So like I even have a video making a simple character model using ZBrush Core only. So if you go to the ZBrush Central and then if you search my name, let's see, activities, topics, and if you look at the post here, I have an example of a model which is only using ZBrush Core, and I think it was done in 9 hours. So yeah, so if you go to the video, there's a turntable, and I thought I linked the videos. Wait, I thought I linked the videos, but if you go to this, you're able to see the entire workflow. A bit time lapse, but it's in 2 hours, so it's better than 9 hours straight. But you get the general understanding of like what process is needed. Also, when trying to do the dress, sometimes it's really hard to see the cloth position when it's just one-sided. Like, you can't really see the back, right? So what you need to do is, usually I just go into display properties and then just enable double so I can see the back as well. But this doesn't really have any thickness. So if you want thickness, you can use dynamic subdivision and then add thickness from it, or you can use paddle loops, or there's another way which is using create difference, and then there's like I think another way to do it is using demodeler. So you have like 4 to 5 ways to actually getting the thickness done. And then I have the rough design of the cloth now, and then what I need to do is make a rough design of the frills from this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rough shape like this, and then use this to make the mesh hit, so I can calculate a couple of like cool stuff using dynamics. And what I need to do is, well, I don't need this amount of lines, so I'm gonna eliminate a couple of lines, delete loops, and select the areas like this. And then what I want to do is I'll just want to register this as the dynamic collision. So if you go to dynamics, the visible mesh will be considered collision volumes. So if I calculate this, and then if I drop some plane, this is just an example for now. So if I drop something like this, it's gonna ignore all the bodies. Sorry, I just used the solo to like hide the mesh. So I just need to do this, recalculate it again, and wait, yeah, did I switch collision volume? Can only calculate it. That should be fine. Non-active visible subtools. Ah, okay, yeah. So yeah, so it's gonna use the other mesh. So I just need a plane, and then I just need a cylinder, which is used as a base like this. And then if I press collision volume, and then if I calculate the volume like this, and go to dynamics, and then drop it, it's gonna consider only this to hit. Sorry, the color is a bit hard to see, so I'm gonna do it again. So yeah, something like this. Yeah, I just talked about the double on the stream right now. So currently I'm using double for this, for this, but I tend to like not use it for all of it because for me it's easy that way. So I'm selectively like choosing which one to use the double. And next, what I would want to do is like, I can just use dynamics and then press simulate, but what in ZBrush there's a cool way to do this, which is using Transpose Cloth, which is in this area. So if you switch to Transpose Cloth, what it does is when you move the gizmo, it's going to consider this as a way to move the cloth, and then it will interact with the collision itself, and then you get a result like this. So I'm going to use this to get some cool designs, and I'm going to enable dynamic subdivisions because I want to see a bit of a wrinkle clearly without getting to like actually increasing the poly counts, because higher poly counts makes the folds a bit more small. So I want to keep this big strokes of the folds itself, but not having to see the rough shape like this, right? So I'm gonna adjust the collision a bit. Oh, I just need to switch back and forth between this and maybe adjusting the shapes a bit. That should be fine. And then let's hide the others. And then recalculate the mesh again. I didn't see the cloth simulation in ZBrush. What? You're missing the entire 2021. So if you upgrade to 2021, there's an entire cloth simulation added to ZBrush. So this is really cool. You should try it out. So I'm getting a shape like this, and sometimes it's not the shape I want. So what I'm gonna do is get a round shape from this. So I'm gonna get a circle mesh and rotate 90 degrees and then increase the size. Oh, I don't need Transpose Cloth for now. And then since it's having this kind of like triangle, is not really good for the simulation, I'm going to use the zero measure to make sure it's symmetrical, and then I don't need really like 5K, so 2K should be fine. And yeah, let's see what it happens. And then if I switch to Transpose Cloth, it's gonna do the same thing. And it's doing it circular. So it has this kind of like clean folds you can see on the drapes. And then if I enable dynamic subdivisions, you can see it has that kind of like nice flaring happening. And then if you want to hit it on the floor, you can do that as well by pulling it down to the floor. And also, if you hit it on the floor, it's gonna like collide it with itself. So for example, if I enable the double, it's gonna have this kind of like collision, but since it's a self collision, it's hitting with itself, it's better to like enable the self collision, and I think 2 would be fine. And then if I move the mesh, it's gonna have a better result like this. So this is a really quick way to get some nice folds. And also what you can do is you can add expand, and let's see what it happens if I press I don't really need gravity for now, like run simulation, and it's gonna expand like this. What it is doing is that it's like it's expanding the length of each edge, and then it's making a fold, additional folds like this. But what I don't want is, I don't really want the top part to be affected by this. So I'm gonna mask out the areas like this, and then let's see what happens. Maybe a bit more and make it a bit masked. Maybe I need to use gravity as well. Gravity will pull it down, so it's gonna like have the folds below. So combining these two, I think I'm gonna start from the beginning and then divide, and then as I do the pulling down process, I'm gonna add a bit more expand to it, so it has more folds, and I'm pulling it down so it has that vertical folds as well. maybe scaling it a bit and then moving it down again. So yeah, quickly you can get some really crazy shapes like this, but I want a bit more control over this. So what I want to do is maybe adjusting it a bit. Also, the speed of the movement of the gizmo itself would affect it differently. So if I move it quickly, like you can see the stretch happening, and then the bounce back, like it's pulling it back to the shape that it should be, and then it's gonna have this like calculation slowly being processed. So like this kind of like stuff is important when you want some draping on the bottom, or if you want the if you want to do it slowly so it has more wrinkles and it's gonna expand more. So also you can start the expand process from the middle of the calculation as well. So yeah, so you need to consider what kind of like effect it's gonna have with moving the gizmo slowly or quickly. It's a mesh skirt like a bride wear. Nice modeling tips. Yeah, these are really powerful tools that you could try on your models. Also, additional tip is that when you go back and forth between, like if you stop the calculation here, and then if you move it up and then down, it's gonna have this kind of like expanding and then pulling and then expanding and pulling. Like it's gonna have this kind of like more complex wrinkles, and then it's gonna hit the floors a bit more. So you have this additional like randomness to it, and you can try that as well. But what I want is a bit more quick, and then doing some bounce, something like this. I don't want to hit the floors too much, and maybe I think I can tweak the expand amount a bit more lower so I can have a bit more control over it. So yeah, something like this. And then if I want more on top of it, which I really want, so I'm gonna duplicate this first. So I have a mesh like this, and then additional mesh, which is just the same one, but I'm going to close this one off with using close holes. So this could be used as a collision. So you need a watertight mesh to be a collision volume. So I just close this off, so it's a watertight mesh now. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use that as a collision volume, so it hits the duplicated one. So I'm going to do the recalculation, and then try to see what kind of like effect it has. And I have dynamic on. I think I want to not expand for now, and then make this. It's sticking, so I think I need to move the mesh slightly first. So it's what it's doing is it's like penetrating the collision, so it's like trying to like hold on to it. So I'm gonna move this a bit and then make the mesh a bit smaller because I want a shorter version of this. And then I'm gonna switch back to Transpose Cloth and try to hit this. And what I want to do is, I think I would like to have a bit expand and then try to see what kind of like effect it has. It's a mesh skirt like bright wear, nice modeling. If I want to use this skirt modeling into UE4 engine, is model work with the NVIDIA cloth simulation system? I'm not really sure about that. Like, I think the cloth system in NVIDIA has its own thing, so I think you need to test it before actually implementing it in the game. So I got the initial shape, and then what I want to do is just gonna take a look at the dress, and then I don't want to have a huge amount of like wrinkles here, so I'm gonna adjust this. And then thinking about like more manual things using cloth hook or cloth slide, I guess, and then having this kind of like effect happening. Also, when using the cloth hook, you can see the brush effect is not really affecting the bottom portion because of the on brushed option. So what this is doing is that it's limiting the calculation area on the brush size, so it's a bit quicker to do the calculation. But the issue is that even if you pull it really hard, it's going to ignore the calculations outside of the brush stroked area. So what I want to do is, I think it's going to take a bit more time, but 3,900 polygons is not really going to affect too much. And since I disabled on brush effect, it's going to pull the bottom portion as well outside of the brush area. So this could do really nice, like fun stuff with your cloth. And then it could do a bit of like more random things that you may need for the cloth. Hi Daisuke, do you think that with the new edition of the new knife brushes that the trim curve brushes are essentially obsolete? Depends. Like, the benefit of the knife brush itself is like, if you have a different geometry like this, for example, and then if you use knife, what it does is that it cuts the mesh, but it doesn't affect the areas which it doesn't touch, right? This is nice, but at the same time, if you want to eliminate the mesh that are opposite of the trim curve or the curve, and if you want to eliminate this entire cylinder, for example, I could do that with trim, but you can't really do that with knife. See? So this slice is going to affect the 3 geometries, but it's not going to eliminate the top left one like this. But if I use the trim curve method, it's going to eliminate the top left one. So I know this is a bit small thing, but I know the people who are used to the trim curve would like to keep that kind of like workflow. If they have that specific workflow in mind, we didn't want to break that stuff. So that's why the trim curve is still there. So it depends on your workflow, yeah. So I don't really need the base mesh anymore. So I'm going to eliminate the base mesh. And then I don't really need the bottom closed off portion of the mesh. So I'm going to delete hidden. And I'm going to like tweak the mesh slightly so it has a bit of an interesting shape to it. And also this part is unnecessary anymore, so I'm going to tweak this as well. So I'm currently moving around the mesh so it fits the other meshes nicely. So it's just a bit of like tweaking, bit of manual adjustments. I'm going to use the zero meshers afterwards if I don't really have a clean topology. So in couple of minutes, I think we started around 6:30, and then now it's like 7:25. Well, in JST, so in Japan it's like 6:30 in the morning. Now it's 7:20. So in 1 hour, I have a basic dress kind of like looking shape, right? Which is awesome, I think. Like starting from scratch and then getting this kind of like wrinkles is a bit hard to do. I think I'm gonna use the cloth nudge with the dynamics and add a bit more wrinkles to it. So it feels like it's pushed against the body with the gravity. I think slightly is fine. I don't know non-ZBrush Japanese artists. One artist from Japan is streaming with us in ZBrush Live, and the artist's name is Sakaki Kaoru. He's a figurine sculptor who has his own company, and he's basically talking about a professional way of like making Japanese style or anime style figurines from scratch. If you haven't seen them in the past, it's a good example. It's all in Japanese, but if you can just visually follow it, like you're gonna learn a lot of things from it. So, and there's a couple of sculptors which is famous in Hollywood. For example, Koji Tajima is one of the ZBrush users who are working in Hollywood from Japan, and I think he's now in Vancouver, and I don't remember correctly, but I think he's working now in ILM, working with interesting titles. And another one is Yuki Morita, who is a creature designer, creature concept artist. And another famous one is Keita Okada, who did a couple of like interesting stuff related to like League of Legends. And League of Legends did I think it was Worlds, and in that Worlds League they were using his sculpt to promote it. So a couple of interesting stuff. Yeah. Do Japanese people like realistic artwork, or realistic is not successful in Japan? It depends. Like there's more bigger industries compared to like photorealistic. In like there's more there's more money involved with more non-photorealistic characters or non-photorealistic 3D models than you can get in like photorealistic stuff. So people who can make photorealistic stuff in Japan will earn more money compared to making more NPR rendering or NPR models. But yeah, there's more people who are interested in like making anime characters compared to like photorealistic ones. So yeah, but yeah, if you're really good at like making photorealistic stuff, then you can be really successful in Japan. Do you know if artists working at toy companies, Hot Toys, use ZBrush? I'm sure they do, yeah. If so, can they be a guest at next ZBrush Summit? I don't know if it's next, but yeah, you can send a request from our support tickets. I can tell it to Paul as well. A little bit off topic, but do you think that 3D modeling is a dying art? It's becoming more and more automated? No, I don't think so, no. things that took 5 hours to do in 2003 now take 30 minutes thanks to the software improvements. Do you think we will lose our jobs one day? No, because like for example, if I want to design a model, and then if I want to like seek what kind of like options or what kind of like designs I can do, and then if I can churn out that design in 30 minutes compared to 3 hours or like 10 hours, I can save a lot of time doing it, and then I can do some iterations. So it doesn't make me lose my job, but I can do a lot of designs related to that specific work. So I can do 6 designs compared to 1 design at the same time, right? So it doesn't make things obsolete. It just makes me a better designer overall, and yeah, more money just focusing on the designs. So back then, I think you are focused more on the workflow itself. Now it's the matter of like what kind of designs, what kind of concepts, what kind of like artwork you're gonna work. So it's giving more power to the artist compared to like manual operations or like operational stuff, right? I think that's a good thing. Funny thing, but I only know Hideo Kojima from Metal Gear Solid. Some people criticize him, but I think he was a good storyteller in Metal Gear Solid. Huh. Photorealistic stuff? Well, if you go to like VFX studios, they are required to do more photorealistic stuff. But those are VFX studios, right? And in game industries, I do know there is a couple of demand for like more looking like a polygon model characters. For example, dead or alive characters would be a popular kind of like style. But yeah, if you want to do really photorealistic stuff, you're gonna earn more money going to the West and doing that stuff. So yeah, it kind of like, it doesn't really like stick on to the audience in Japan, I guess. But it depends on who you ask, what studio you work for. The only concern I see is companies wanting their fast too as the technology is advanced. The deadline adjusts with how quick the things are completed. Yeah, the crunch time aspect of the industry is getting a bit worse in my opinion. Yeah. So people are required to work more harder because they don't need to wait for the time. Like for example, if I wanted to like render things which is more like really clear, fine defined, or like more in a high resolution, it took me around like an hour or so to like render one really good render. But now, like because of like GPUs, it's gonna just like take a minute or so. So I don't really have the time to take a tea or take a bathroom break in that while. So yeah, because of the advancements brought by science, there is a couple of couple of things that could be not really healthy for your health. So for example, like because we currently work remotely, like you feel that you're working constantly. If you go back to your PC and stuff, like you don't really have the separation between life and your work, because you're working in the same location with the same like PC sometimes. And yeah, I think sometimes things could feel that way as well. But the good thing, there's a couple of good things as well. Like, I don't want to wait for a couple of hours to get my mesh cleared out as well, right? So that's a good thing. Currently, I'm doing the broad strokes of the folds. I'm gonna do the bumps and the hills afterwards, but currently I'm thinking about where to place the folds and what kind of like flow should be appropriate. And currently I'm using symmetry, but I'll try to break the symmetries as I go along, because cloth folds shouldn't be symmetrical. Like if you have asymmetrical folds, it's gonna look really weird. Am I wrong to think Japanese don't like strong female characters much? Why? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest. Like there's a lot of like strong female characters in Japanese animes and stuff. It's not really the typical way the West sees the world. Like, you don't really see a lot of like masculine female characters coming from Japan, but like for example, that's like picking and choosing what kind of like things that fits your narrative. Like for example, if you're like, if you don't really see, like for example, Street Fighter has a couple of like fighters which is female but really strong, same level as the male characters, but if like some people don't really see Street Fighter as a Japanese game as well, right? So it's like picking and choosing what fits your narrative. So sometimes I don't feel that way. Like for example, I like the anime series called the Scientific Railgun series, and in that main character, it's a female character, and she's really strong, but she's there's some scenarios where she can't really take it by herself, so she'll have to rely on other characters, which is more heroines and sometimes a male character. But yeah, she handles most of the stuff on her own. So it depends on how you define strong. If it's like masculine, yeah, I don't think Japanese audience really like female character to be really masculine, but there is masculine characters which is female a lot. So it depends on where you see it, where you attach the narrative to that specific stuff. Yes, I thought Street Fighter was American. Yeah, so yeah, I can see a couple of like people saying, "Oh, that's I didn't think that was Japanese," and like Sonic the Hedgehog itself is Japanese, like born from Sega. Sega is a Japanese company, but people don't see it like that. Like, do people see Nintendo as a Japanese company? It is international, but the main stuff which is developed is in Japan, and like for example, Sony is a Japanese company as well, and I don't know how much people see Sony as a Japanese company. Yeah, I know they're like the Street Fighters, like the people who are actually sculpting the characters for the Street Fighters are sometimes outside of Japan, but yeah. But the guys who are designing the characters, like designing the stuff, works in Japan, in Osaka. So it's hard to find things. So what I did right now is that I defined the line of where the folds will be with using damn standard brush. So I placed a couple like folds like this, and then what I did is switch to a standard brush and then made the hills like this. So usually what I would do is use standard brush to get these kind of like folds in place, and then use smoothing to actually get a weaker version of that stuff. And then if I need a weaker brush, weaker intensity, I'll do that as well. But usually I define the lines using the damn standard and then get the overall shape and then go from there. So you can make some really cool cloths or folds using standard brush. And using the combination of smooth brush, it's better to like use the smooth brush in a low intense way and then just like tap the smoothness like this. You don't really need to like scrub it, like it's just tapping will be enough for getting the folds to be in the position. I can't, is that Hebrew or? I can't really read Hebrew. If it's not ninja and samurai or giant robots, it's not Japanese. Also, like strong like female characters, like it's how you depend, like how you think it is. So some people like make the female characters really have a lot of like background, but sometimes they are criticized for not having those backgrounds. But the fans would like to like complain about those critiques because they know the characters work really well. They have a lot of backgrounds with the characters. They have a lot of like stories, but the people who are criticizing sometimes don't really know about the characters, and they just judging the characters from the outlook. And I see those kind of like stuff happening a lot in the anime community sometimes. Also, like for example, dead or alive characters, for example, they are a fighter who is like competing against a male character as like in the same level as what the male character does, but it's not really like designed as a really like masculine character. It's more designed as a cute, sexy character, and but it depends on how you define strong, right? Does it need to be really physical to be the same level as the male characters, or can it be like designed like that, but like on the same level as the male characters? So it really depends, I think. So like my usual go-to about these kind of like topic is that like the Western community tend to not like characters which is female and which doesn't really have a big chunk of like muscle on the shoulders and holding a big sword. And for example, Berserk's Guts has a really big sword, but he has the muscle to like hold that kind of like sword. But if you do that in a female character with a cute design and she doesn't really have a muscle, the West would like to criticize those kind of like stuff. So for me, like I kind of like that romance of the big sword with a cute design, and I really like those kind of like concepts. But the West really doesn't like those kind of design concepts, so I don't know. Honestly, I like those kind of like unmatching things. Like it doesn't go together, but it goes well. But yeah, sometimes like people criticize Japanese style of art because it doesn't fit their usual way of like seeing things. Like they like to talk about physical stuff, but in reality, they not like Japanese are not really intending to be that physical. Like it could be a side plot, like for example, magic could be a good like buff to like enhance your strengths to actually get the swords to be swinged, and those kind of like unmatching design elements are sometimes really good for the designs. So if you think about realistic stuff, you are constrained to the physical world, but Japanese artists tend to sometimes really ignore those kind of like elements, and they will just like to go their route to enjoy or experiment what works, and usually sometimes it's fun that way. How to make one polygon thinner with the help of extrude. Thinner? You mean if you have a cube? Are you talking about a way to make this part, like this part, thinner, like this? Oh, I don't need. So you're talking about something like this, right? So what you want to do is when you use the demodeler and if you use the Q mesh, you can move the mesh like this, but you can press the shift key to move it. So like if you do this on the all polygons or polygroups, then move it, and then while moving you can press the Shift key, so it makes it thin. So you can do this as well. So is that your question? How to make one polygon thinner with the help of extract. I get them thick. Oh. If you get something thick, then usually what I do is that I just lower down the extract's thickness value to 0, so it only has that one side. And then after that, I just apply a thickness, like using dynamic subdivisions, and then sometimes I just use the thickness values here. So it can apply thickness after I get the shape of the extract. And I don't really need to bother the opposite side of the mesh. And sometimes making the cloth would be easier this way. So yeah. I just use extract with 0 thickness. Okay. Well, yeah, I've never been open-minded to see a thing go using a heavy weapon as a touch of magic. Yeah. Yeah, you can you can justify the actual like background stuff afterwards, after the fact that you have designs, but but if you start like thinking, oh no, I shouldn't do that because blah blah blah, you're just stopping before you actually go into the designs, or like what kind of like experiments you can do with it. So it's like having a sculpt model and then you're constrained with topology because I don't want to retopologize afterwards because the topology should be like this, but you're ruining, or you're not really experimenting on the design if you stop there, right? So if you have an idea and then if you try it first and then think about what kind of like things that could be justified, or what kind of like ways you can justify that reasoning, would open up a lot of things. And I think why Japanese anime, Japanese style of manga has a lot of things that is unique to Japanese stuff is, I think that is one of the reasons why it has those kind of like elements. And Japan tend to like ignore those physics first and then apply those like reasoning afterwards. And I see a lot of like foreign artists or Western artists doing the opposite compared to like those kind of stuff. Oh, the character needs to be physically fit to like carry the sword. Like, but does it really need to be physically fit to carry that sword? Is it free for 30 days? Yeah, ZBrush is free for 30 days for trial. If you want to use more from over the trial, you need to think about the subscription, or you need to think about the perpetual licenses. good example about like anatomy, well, good example of like confined to the reality is like Japanese artists tend to sometimes ignore anatomy entirely, but I think most of the Western artists is really confined to the anatomy. Like they can't really ignore the anatomy when it's even cooler that way. Cooler or cuter that way, but like I see a lot of like artists who would like think about designs, would stop because it doesn't really make sense anatomically, but I think it really depends. Like, do you really need to stop there, or could it be really explored differently? I think for a lot of like Western artists, back to basics is the main like way to think about things, but I don't think Japanese artists would just stick to basics. They do in the beginning, but they would usually just ignore the basics after a while, and they'll start to do some like weird techniques on their own, and they will come up with some like wacky designs that nobody thought of, and those are really unique to like those artists, and they can't really replicate those kind of stuff. So like when you think about Godzilla, I think about how the Hollywood approached Godzilla, and what turned out to be the Godzilla in the West was a lizard, which looks like a dinosaur, and like it's a T-Rex basically, and it was like a extended version of the Jurassic Park design, but Godzilla is not really a dinosaur, right? It is a bit of a lizard, but it's not really a dinosaur. So, yeah, I think those kind of like design differences, design philosophy, does exist in those kind of like stuff exists differently in Japan and the West. Like the creature design isn't really like confined to like physical like reasoning or anatomy. So yeah, but I do like anatomy. I do think you'd need to learn it, but at some point you need to ignore it to get a cooler design or better design. Like you need to think about when to turn off that like anatomy switch in your brain to get a better design, right? 日本語の体験版を使ってるんですが、thick skin が見当たらないんですが、このバージョンにはないんでしょうか。ZBrush の体験版に関してはですね、2020のバージョンとなっていると思います。なので、2021以降に搭載された機能が追加されていません。なので、thick skin および、ダイナミックスですね。クロスシミュレーションとかですね。そこら辺は2021から搭載された機能なので、体験版には入っていないという状態になっています。What are your thoughts on sculpting with Blender? I'm not going to answer that question because I answered that already in the last stream. Hi everyone, hey. That's also true. I can't create anything. I always feel bad about my anatomy skills. Yeah, yeah, you don't really need to rely on the anatomy. Like, for example, if you're making a creature, you can say that it's a creature. But yeah, if you take a look at the references and then understand what the overall like baseline of the design is, like you can do something. But in the West, you tend to like rely on the anatomy to back your. You have a better backbone with the anatomy, but like having a better backbone is fine. But like making a design or an idea irrelevant, if you like making that irrelevant because you don't have any backbone to it, is like I really have a mixed feeling with it. Like you can ignore some things, like you can pick and choose what kind of like anatomy or what kind of like mechanics would make sense to make that character, and then you can go from there. But like you can't, like if you start denying all the design because it doesn't really have that backbone or the reasoning behind it, I think it's really hard to design anything, to be honest. You need to start from your gut feeling and then like add the mechanics afterwards. Mechanics or the design reasoning afterwards. This is a good example of when you need to retopologize. So I want a line which goes directly like straight on the surface, but since I'm having this kind of like stretch rectangles, I can't do this. So what I need to do is apply retopology. So ZBrush and then cleaning out the stretching happening on this mesh. So every time I go to a forum or a Facebook group, you see these kind of like questions all the time, but it's because of this stretching behind it on the polygons. You need to straighten out these stretching so you can have the even surface to get the sculpting really clean. So if you see a stretching happening like this, well, like that you saw before I retopologize, that's when you need to retopologize. Especially if you're like trying to like sculpt a diagonal line, and if you can't really do the diagonal lines, it's the time you need to retopologize. If you're just doing straight, you're not gonna notice that much, but it's better to like freehand like this if you're especially doing the folds. And if you can't draw a good diagonal line, you're gonna need to divide it too much, and then you're gonna have a problem. So it's better to have a cleaner topology compared to that. Yeah, I see this like questions related to topology all the time. Like people recommend doing Dynamesh, but if I Dynamesh right now, it's gonna close off this area, and it's not gonna do the same effect. So you just need to understand why it's happening and how to solve it. It's happening because it has a stretch on the underlying topology, and you need to make that square as much as possible, not really like elongated rectangles. Yeah, if you can have a cleaner topology, you're going to save up a lot of like polygons. Like you sometimes see a lot of like polygons, which is unnecessary to make that shape, and you're going to have a slowdown because of that. But if you can clean up that unnecessary polygons, and then if you can have a more optimized topology, you're going to have a better result. Usually what I define as a like sculptable surface is really a square like this. You're not going to have a really like stretched rectangles on the surface, so it's divided evenly. So this is what you call a topology, which is suited for sculpting. What about the folds you are doing right now? Are you doing from memory or from reference? I am looking at references, but I just need to understand where the folds are likely to happen. So in my head, what I'm thinking is that there's a line here because let me change the colors. Let me just paint black. In my brain, what I'm doing is I'm calculating where the folds happen. So for example, I want to have a line that could like go around like this. Like this, right? But at the same time, you have this vertical lines which is going down. So you have the areas which is pushed around like this, but you have the other folds which is going broadly. So there's the broad shapes, the smaller folds, and then you have the patterns. So what I'm doing right now is thinking about where the folds would happen naturally. So usually it's gonna be on the side like this, and if it's on the back, it's gonna be happening like asymmetrical like this. And then once the folds end, there's another fold that would start like this. So it's just like drawing triangles, like broad, big triangles, and then thinking where that triangle would apply, including if you think about the movement. Like, for example, you're pulling up the thing on the top here. So is it better to like think about that kind of like pulling up effect? And then if that's the case, then you need to think about where the pulling starts. So if the bottom part is like getting pulled as well, then you need to think about, oh, this is pulled. So you have this direction of pull like this, like going up. And since this is going up, the surrounding area would be affected by this. So you're going to have this kind of like bump. and then if it's going this way, it's gonna affect the other to be going down. So that you have this kind of like big wave happening on the surface. Thoughts on using Marvelous Designer or Claw 3D? Yeah, you can use those. It depends on your workflow and what kind of like stuff you want, because Claw or Marvelous could be really good for T-poses, but if you start to do some posed models, you're gonna want a specific fold to follow that like shape, and then ZBrush would be really good for those kind of stuff. So when you're thinking about like folds, you need to think about the these kind of like triangles, where it drapes, where it has that like tension. And if it's getting pulled, you have that tension. You don't have any like draping happening. Like it's not loose. But the part where it's not really draping, it has that where it's not getting pulled or where it's not really sustained, you have that like loosened part. It has that draping. And if you think about those kind of like stuff, how much it drapes, how much it gets folded, by controlling those kind of like factors, you're gonna have a softer cloth. You're gonna have a harder cloth. So if you look at here, you're not gonna have too much folds, because I wanted to have this area to be in a different material. So it's hard, but in this area, you have a more softer surface from here. So you have a more softer folds, but currently it's using DAM standard, so it's really defined right now. But you can break this definitions and then make it a softer line like this to make the like cloth feel a bit softer. And then if you blur it like this and then do a smaller folds on top of it, it's going to feel more softer. And also you can do this all day. So if you have a lower intensity like 10, and then if you sculpt and then blur it and then sculpt, blur it, you're gonna have a really soft surface. But if it's defined like this, it's more hard cloth. Cloth is so difficult that I was also thinking about Marvelous Designer and ZBrush simulations. Well, you need to understand the basics first, I guess. You need to understand where the cloth fold would happen and what kind of like cloth fold you have. Like if it's a seam, like it's a really, really defined line, or is it a more softer, round kind of like seam? So you need to control this depth as well. So if it's like a cloth around your arm, it's really defined because it's bending. It's really getting a huge tension. But the other areas is not really pushed around that much. So you have that gradient between really high tensioned folds versus the the gradual like loosened folds on the areas which is more far away from there. So you like imagine a heat map. So you have a mesh like this, and these areas are really gonna have a really high amount of like folds, right? And then you have the areas which is more loose, which doesn't really have any actions on the surface. And then you're gonna have that middle part where you're gonna have that mix between the two colors, the heat. Yeah, so usually I think about like putting a line around this like difference between the heat maps, and then like making the definition or the lines a bit more visible, so I can have this kind of like stuff. Also, the end of the cloth will be really loose, because you're not gonna like, I should wear something long because it's gonna be easier for me to visualize, but since I'm not wearing a long cloth, I'm gonna like try to show you. So these areas is loose because you can, the cloth would escape if you push it. It's gonna escape from here to here. So because it's the end of the cloth, you have more loosened areas. But if it's in between, like if you have a mesh, if you have a line here, it's getting pushed by this side and this side. So you have a mountain getting pushed from both sides, and then you have a fold happening, right? But these areas wouldn't have a fold because nothing is gonna hit unless your tip of the cloth is hitting other cloth, or if you have a metal part that's really rigid, so it's making that rigidness affect the looseness of your cloth, and those kind of like stuff will need to be factored in. But you just need to count. You just need to think where those kind of like folds could happen, and then draw a line there. So especially like you can see this area right here is getting affected by, like it's getting pushed by both sides. Like this can't go anywhere. This area can't go anywhere. They can't escape. So it's making that fold to try to escape from the both sides of the like pressure, right? But in this area, you don't really have any. You don't have any like big folds happening, because the only fold would happen is the gravity itself. Like you're not really changing any surface areas because you don't really have any pressure here. So you just need to think about these kind of like pressure lines, and then think about those kind of like stuff. So I made a lot of like folds right here because it's getting pushed by the arms, because it's like doing this, right? So it's getting a lot of folds from the side, and then these folds will in turn like push this area. So maybe there could be these kind of like small folds happening. Do you have any course I can buy from you? No, I'm well, this is free basically. Like, you can see my stream. It's free. You can see it anytime. And then like it's getting this side pressure, and then because the cloth would need to escape from that area, you're going to have that area affect the other side. So you're going to have this vertical line happening, or you're going to have this vertical line happening. And then I'm thinking about, because it has this pressure from the side, and then it's having this vertical line here, maybe makes sense to have a line here, right? And then because the elbows and the other like these areas are getting pushed as well, you have another additional folds here. And then because it's getting pushed, maybe a small line here would happen. But it will be combined with this area. So you're going to have this small folds, big folds, and you have the wave happening on the surface. So you just need to think about what would affect that area and how much would it affect. So, and if you have a strong crease like this, if you have a strong fold like this, it's gonna like show you're moving, or you're gonna show an impact on the surface. So this looks more dramatic if you do it effectively. So I draw a big line here because I wanted the end of the torso, or the start of the hips, to be visible, right? So I just defined the line to be visible here, and then it just created this triangle. So this fold's intention was to make the body a bit more visible. So it kind of like shows where the body changes, or the action changes, right? And then the others are more like a dramatic effect after this. It's just doing this kind of like wave like this, so it can have that kind of like ripple effect from this. And then it's now getting loose because the cloth can get away from the tension. So the actual movement of the tension will be the vertical, and then the others getting pushed from the side, and now it can get loose because it's end of the cloth. So these kind of like factors I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about cloth. So yeah, this could be really hard. You just need to think about where you just need to like place the cloth. And also there's additional factors as well. Like you have this additional side pressures as well. So I'm thinking about where the line could apply here. And then where it transitions, like, is it going to be like this? And then where does it mix from here? Like, is it going to be this, or is it going to be around the shape like this? So a lot of factors to think. So why I picked this concept is that it's really hard to do this unless you know the basics. So the basic thing would be just getting the cloth for this area would be really basic, because it's tension and looseness in just one simple form. You don't really have any factors to think about. But now if I'm doing this cloth, it's multiple factors I need to think about. The shoulders and the looseness, and getting the like bending the cloth so I can hold in air, those kind of like actions. It's more additional factors to think about. So this is really complex. But this one is really simple because it's just one heat map. Like, it's just thinking about where the elbow is, and then what kind of like wrapping, what kind of like cloth would be getting affected. So just one factor to think about. But this would be more things because you have shoulder blades, torsos, you have where the fold would be loose, where it's getting holded, and you have additional actions as well. And another factor would be I intentionally separated the material between the top part. This will be more rigid, but this will be loose. So you have the difference between the how big the fold is as well. Does that make sense? I know it's pretty hard. Like it's not a thing that you can learn in one day. You need to do a lot of like sculpting to get the theory and the practice to be on your side. And then like after you think about these kind of the big waves, you need to think about, oh, I have a vertical line here, vertical here, vertical here, where what kind of like waves would affect the vertical lines as well. So yeah. Well, I'm a newbie too. Like if you ask a more professional sculptor who is doing this daily, like sculpting folds every day, they will have a better understanding of the folds, so he's gonna do a better job at it. But for me, I have a drawing background, so I have a bit of a background like drawing cloths and what kind of like folds could fit, and those are my backgrounds when it comes to like getting the folds in the place. And I tend to have a habit of making the folds too unified. So for example, this fold on the shoulder and the folds on this area looks pretty similar, right? But it should be different because this area is hard compared to this, so it should be more subtle if there's no pressure or if there's no thing that's gonna push or affect the surface. And also hard cloth would have a bigger crease if it's getting pushed really hard, because you can't really bend a really hard cloth without like having a lot of like pressure applied to it. So you need to think about how hard the cloth is after you get where to place the fold is. So for me, like first of all, I'm thinking about where to place it, and then drawing out what kind of like pressure or what kind of like fold it could have. So using the dam standard is one way to define where to place the folds, and then using the standard brush would be my way to go to like actually apply the folds. Okay, so it's 8:30. I think I need to start my stream here and continue on next week. And next week will be a lot of like folds. But yeah, I basically explained the idea or the concept that you need to think about, and then it's just a matter of how much intense, how much loose, what kind of like cloth it's using, where to place them, and those kind of like factors. Just thinking about those would be enough for like a couple of streams, or even like getting these kind of like concepts in your head. It would take a bit of time to actually do. Like it doesn't come in a day or so. So like some people think about these kind of like folds that could be accomplished by features, but usually it's not features, nor it's not cloth. No, it's not like it's nor the cloth brushes that it's sold on the website or the marketplace. It's just it comes really down to understanding of the cloth. So if you have people who can't do cloth, it's just that you need to see a lot of cloth to get your mental simulations happening in your brain. The physical, how should you call them? Like the physical calculations done mentally in your brain to like see where the cloth could happen, cloth fold could happen. But yeah, it does take time. Like, it's sometimes really hard to like see when it's really like the real world will have a lot of like cloth folds that doesn't make sense, but it's the part you need to pick and choose so it makes sense on your sculpt versus would it make sense physically. So for example, if I have a fold that does look really realistic, but the issue is that it doesn't really like it doesn't really show the body line of the character. Does it make, is it better to have the body lines visible compared to the actual fold being realistic? And those kind of like factors you need to think about as well. Like there was a figurine company who was talking about like art directions, and they were showing some diagrams saying that you need to have a fold here because especially these kind of like setups or these kind of like characters, you can't really see the body line, you can't really see where the leg is, and this specific dress is designed like that. But if the dress needs some action or movement, then it's better to have that like showing where the knee is or showing where the leg is at the same time. So it's then it becomes the choice by like the artist, and you need to get to that point as soon as possible if you're learning to do the cloth. So learning the basic of how the cloth would work is the basics, and then you need to think about what kind of like artistic value you can add by using that fold to your advantage at the end. Like, it's the level of like expertise. Like the experts will control the folds, the beginners will be controlled by the folds. I mean, and I think I'm the middle area. So I do understand the basic of the folds, but I'm not really really good at it at the level of the expert level. Like, I'm not really the top-notch level you can see. So there's a lot of like artists who will show you a better understanding of their folds, and yeah, I think that's how the artists progress. Like, you start from the beginning, understand the theory, and then use it to your advantage at the end. Yeah, no problem. Recently I heard about the way the lawyers and the doctors use the term practice, and I think it's a good way to like think about the sculpting. It's always a practice. Like, I practice law is the same as I practice sculpting, right? Like I practice in this kind of like medicine. I practice this kind of like stuff in sculpting, which makes sense for me. Like I'm always practicing, I'm experimenting what kind of stuff would work. I'm not really like a master of anything at this point. Like I don't really master at things. So I'm always experimenting, I'm always practicing. I think that's how the artist should look at sculpting as well. So I'm gonna end my stream here. I'm gonna stop sculpting because I'm gonna like go on forever, and like I'm currently seeing a lot of like imperfections on my sculpt and I can't really stop. So yeah, usually it's better to like stop here and then do it and continue on next week or next week. Yeah, I can't stop. Okay, so see you guys. Have a good day.